Last episode, the shame machine. Survival systems corrupted. Running as background processes you didn't install. This episode, those processes didn't stay at the software level. They went into the hardware, into your cells, before you had any say in the matter. So, let's look at ages 0 to 7. The brain operates primarily in theta waves, essentially a hypnotic state. Highly suggestible, optimized for rapid information download. Now this is actually elegant engineering. Think about it. How else does a child acquire language in 2 years? Absorb an entire culture. Learn survival protocols. And the problem is, there's no filtering mechanism, no critical evaluation. Whatever the environment broadcasts gets written directly to the drive, no firewall. Core operating parameters. Am I competent or deficient? Am I valued or disposable? What are the rules of this system? What happens when I fail to comply? Which of my capabilities are acceptable? Which must be suppressed? The answers to these questions, whatever your environment provided, became your base code, not because you evaluated them, because you were in theta, and there was no firewall. So your parents, they were your primary data source. They defined your parameters, competent or incompetent, acceptable or flawed. But here's the thing that changes everything. They were running their programming, their shadows, their shame machines, their unprocessed errors. When they were harsh, critical, withholding, that was often their code executing, not a conscious choice, an automatic subroutine. Turns out, the programmers were programmed. It's bad code all the way down. Their parents programmed them. Their parents' parents programmed their parents. The greatest generation. Depression survivors, World War II. They installed survival mode firmware. Stoic, tough, emotionally compressed. Each generation's unprocessed material becomes the next generation's initial programming. This isn't about blame allocation. It's about understanding the transmission mechanism. You weren't programmed because you were defective. You were programmed because the system programs everyone. And then there was an article in Psychology Today that identified a pattern. Certain parenting behaviors, they were normalized into standard practice. And they're now recognized as emotional manipulation. Withholding affection as behavioral control. Guilt deployment for compliance. Forced apologies before emotional processing. Punishment of emotional expression. You might have heard, "Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry for." These weren't classified as abuse. They were just methods. But the outcomes are clear. Rewired self-worth assessment, anxiety, perfectionism, compulsive people-pleasing. "I turned out fine," says the person spending thousands on therapy. Growing up in this environment was suboptimal. Emotional neglect was marketed as independence. Conditional acceptance labeled as discipline. Then factor in overt abuse, physical, sexual, or severe neglect. Many experienced both. They normalized harm and direct trauma. This isn't edge case. This is standard distribution. So Lipton's research changes the model entirely. Old paradigm. DNA-controlled destiny. Genetic determinism. Gone. Lipton found the cell membrane, not the nucleus where the DNA is. The cell membrane is a control system. The membrane reads environmental signals and tells the cell how to respond. Key insight. Your beliefs institute your internal environment. The body cannot distinguish between actual threat and perceived threat. If the system believes, I am deficient, cells receive threat signal. Stress response activates. For decades. The CDC designated childhood adversity as priority 1 public health concern, and not for psychological reasons, for physiological outcomes. ACE studies demonstrate direct causation between childhood adversity and adult disease. Diseases like cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disorders, metabolic dysfunction like diabetes, addiction patterns, mental health conditions. More adversity, worse outcomes. Linear correlation there. The program didn't stay psychological, it became biological. And you didn't select this programming. You were in theta. You were a baby and a toddler and a little kid. It installed automatically. Your parents ran their code, their parents ran theirs, and the system propagates itself again and again. The shame response you experience is not diagnostic evidence of actual deficiency. It's evidence of programming installed without consent by people who were programmed without consent. Now here's where it gets really interesting. If programming is installed in, it can be modified. Epigenetics operates bidirectionally. Gene expression responds to environmental signals. Genes activate and genes deactivate based on input. Modify the beliefs, modify the internal environment, modify the cellular signals, modify the biology. You're not constrained by DNA. You're not locked into the code. The system is updatable. So that's the architecture. Programming installed at the cellular level. Downloaded before conscious evaluation was even possible. By sources that were themselves programmed. Not your fault. And modifiable. Next episode. Why cognitive reframing alone doesn't resolve this. Polyvagal theory. How the nervous system assesses threat without consulting your conscious mind. See you next time.